Previously. Hi everybody, I'm Anna. Make sure you watch the previous episodes before you move on to the next one. So, today I'm going to Gentlewomen Hell. In case you don't know, there are some special boarding schools in England where rich people from different countries send their kids. As you know, this isn't done because their children behave well. Anyone who has ever encountered such a thing knows that a boarding school is a prison for those who have serious problems. And the students here correspond to that status. Half of them have parents who can't cope with them, so-called problem teenagers. Alcohol, drugs, crimes, early pregnancy. But the second half is much more difficult. Usually, these are teenagers whose parents protect them from things that are much more terrible in their life, like prison. There are no normal guys here. Normal people study in different places, and the attitude towards them is also different. And we don't deserve teachers and tutors. We only deserve supervisors. I was right to say this place looked like a prison. And that's what it was, except there were no dossiers for every inmate, and there was no summer vacation. At first, I naively thought with a couple of months left before graduation, I would somehow survive. Yeah, a couple of months. They quickly told me a school certificate is a great thing, but it doesn't guarantee you release. I would study at this school until I was 21. And if I didn't improve myself during this time, my parents wouldn't want to see me again. I would be transferred to some English monastery. Really, why do noble and very rich people need a girl who's always spoiling their perfect reputation? Of course, I freaked out. I screamed and demanded to be released immediately. I didn't do anything terrible. I was forced to. Anyway, then I was told that absolutely all the students screamed the same. At that moment, the principal personally doused me with ice water and took me to the punishment cell. I will tell you honestly, never, under any circumstances, never ever get into this cursed place. My nightmares got their new shell in that stone bag, where I was just thrown, without explaining any rules or procedures. The principal called it a necessary measure to bring down the arrogance of another upstart. Since then, no matter what happened at school, I swear, I tried to make sure the teachers, supervisors didn't find out about it. Everything could be worse. They would make it worse. So I had to somehow conceal this fact. Plus, the punishment cell for a long time discouraged me from playing pranks, or rather, hoping for justice. My first days at my new school were a blur. I didn't pay attention to the fact there were 3 other girls living in the room I was assigned to, or to the lessons, or to the whispers behind my back. Everything was unimportant to me, except I was sentenced to the school without trial. My parents just threw me out like some unnecessary thing. But gradually, reality returned. Though honestly, I would have preferred it didn't. It turned out the newcomers are bad everywhere. And in the prison school, the degree of bad gets the size of an elephant, which was impossible to leave unnoticed. I didn't get along with my roommates right away. For some reason, they decided that since I was new and weak, I should fulfill all their wishes, and in fact, be their servant. And they proved it by force. 3 of them against 1 of me, which of course I didn't like too much. But I couldn't do anything. Then it turned out the school was divided into strong and weak, plus leaders and losers. Well, like everywhere. Like in prison, yeah. The one who is stronger is right. And if you set yourself up and showed your weakness, you'd be a servant for everyone. Everyone, even the most downtrodden losers, felt it was their duty to show me where I belonged. Of course, I fought back against losers, but I didn't have a chance against girls who literally grew up on the street endlessly fighting, and I had to obey. They took my food. Not all of it, just the best bits and desserts. But I couldn't eat what was left, even if I was really hungry. The new uniform issued by one of the wardens was also taken away from me immediately. They left me some old clothes a couple of sizes too big, and all my personal valuables were stolen when I was in the punishment cell on the first day, except for my cell. I even slept with it in my arms and hid it as my greatest treasure. For the first time, I really thought about the fact that being a leader doesn't mean humiliating those who are weaker. And for the first time, I was really ashamed of the fact that for many years I was engaged in these humiliations, built on my popularity, fear, and bribes. Well, in the end, fate itself took revenge on me, putting me in the place of the victim of such harassments. In order not to go crazy, I tried to correspond with former friends. I even wrote to Mickey and Laura about my despair and was very surprised they answered back. The girls wrote they didn't think this terrible thing would ever happen. They were guilty and they apologized. I believed it. I really needed to trust someone back then. But the correspondence with Dora, who was the only one who didn't try to feel sorry for me, but honestly tried to help, quickly brought me back to Earth. It turned out everything I wrote to the girls was then read in front of all my classmates, even rhyming into very offensive and evil poems. Dora said she tried to stop them, but I told her not to get involved because she might get hurt. I still didn't want her to suffer. My parents didn't respond to my messages. My friends had long since stopped being my friends, and they took advantage of my weakness only to humiliate me even more. One good thing, Ariel was expelled from school for stealing and cheating. There's some justice in it, but I doubt her parents did the same thing to her that mine did to me. Dora was the only thing that made me wake up in the morning. She wrote me long letters every day, worried and supported me. If it wasn't for her, I'd probably go crazy, because every day my new classmates came up with more and more terrible and evil things to do to me. And at some point, I broke down. I didn't care how or why. I was on the phone begging Dora to do something to save me. Anything. At least send me a stronger rope. Or I could use it to get out the window, or... No, both options suited me equally. Dora asked me to be patient. She promised to help, but as time went on, it only got worse. I believed my smart girl, of course, but when the teachers joined in, I snapped. It seemed to me they were doing everything to break me, to destroy. Each setup by the students rigged. Every vile act rehearsed in advance by the teachers. I knew for sure everyone who isn't lazy would climb into my things, and in the evenings, comment on my correspondence with my classmates and parents. The first I wrote out of depression. The second begged to take me away, but nothing came out on both sides. So I wasn't sorry. Let these morons have fun, thinking I was terribly ashamed. But when one of these young talents found hidden files on my phone, the situation changed dramatically. As a result, I saved my chats with Dora, the last bright piece of my life, which I definitely wasn't going to give to someone. And at that moment, I didn't really care about the punishment cell, the punishments, and other things. So the teachers ran in and saw me in a torn shirt, with my hands streaked with someone else's nails, and hair that was clearly missing a couple of clumps, standing on the bodies of my unconscious roommates. I clutched the phone I'd won in battle to my chest. By the way, they couldn't take it away from me. More precisely, they couldn't get it out of my hands. I clung to it. So they dragged me to the punishment cell. For the first few hours after the fight, I wasn't afraid, not a bit. Is this how adrenaline works? I didn't even understand how I handled 3 athletic girls with much more extensive fight experience. While sitting in the dark, all I could think about was how I'd managed to keep my correspondence with Dora a secret from everyone. Then, when my hands started shaking and all the scratches and abrasions started hurting, I reread her messages and cried. And again, I wasn't afraid, because it seemed that Dora would definitely save me. My dear smart girl. She would succeed. I just have to wait. I also thought about how small my previous fears were. Like, I was afraid to get judged by my classmates, or not become the school beauty queen. Such stupid trifles. Even the fear of parents and that room in my house looked so stupid. Eventually, I ended up sobbing into the phone, through the static and noise from the walls that were too thick to let the signal out, begging Dora to do something quickly, before I did something to myself or went crazy. I didn't fall asleep until the morning, when the sun started to shine through the crack in the doorway. Well, when I fell asleep, I rather dozed off, because I didn't really want to sleep after such a trauma. I knew I was going to be alone for a couple more days, so I wasn't going to move much. And why move? If there is still a hopeless nightmare ahead, where the days are no different from each other. But it turned out I can still be surprised. My parents came to see me quite unexpectedly. To say I was in shock and the school administration was horrified is an understatement. Normally, parents didn't interfere with the upbringing of teenagers who were sent to this wonderful place. And my parents not only entered the premises, but also demanded to urgently see me. And I was so unlucky. I ended up in the brig and looked like a dead man after the fight. Well, in fact, I looked like a dead man all the time in this place. But that's not a reason not to show me to decent and rich people, like my parents. But the principal had no choice. My dad was not a man who liked to wait. I was ushered into the principal's office, battered, dirty, and thin as a shadow. She still tried to say something about problem teenagers and punishments, but my parents had already made their conclusions. And, to my joy, their conclusions were not in favor of the school at all. After such a huge scandal, I was transferred to an English hospital. A week later, when the doctors were sure I was all right, except for slight exhaustion, I returned home. The first thing I did was contact Dora, of course, because I believed she was the one who saved me from my personal hell. But why? So, what do you think will happen next? Let's find out. Subscribe to the channel so that you stay tuned and don't miss the final episode of the series. Don't forget to click the bell button.